Welcome back, folks. I'm Frizz, and today I'd like to take some time to talk about critical hits. They're clearly just a basic part of combat in Pathfinder 2e, but there is a bit going on under the surface that isn't immediately obvious that really does impact the game design of the system. Subtle little game design elements are fun to talk about, alright? At the simplest, critical hits are important for two main reasons. First, dealing double damage in a single attack can utterly change the course of a fight. Big hits turn into gargantuan hits, and attacks that just barely avoid finishing off an enemy can actually finish the job if they're a critical hit. The second big reason is just as important. Big numbers make the brain go brr, and critical hits are big numbers. Beyond this baseline description of why critical hits are good, there's a lot more going on with them. Obviously, I'm talking about critical specialization effects. Every weapon belongs to one of a whole bunch of different weapon groups that all have their own effect on a critical hit. Some of them debuff targets, some deal extra damage, and some just cause a little bit of inconvenience. Beyond the differences of actual specialization effects, every class gets access to critical specialization effects differently. Martial classes tend to get access to them at level 5, but they don't normally get critical specialization with all weapons. As an example, barbarians only can, benefit from critical specialization effects when they're raging, and only with melee weapons. Now, of course, this means that barbarians are almost always going to be able to benefit from them, because when is a barbarian not raging? This does act as another way for Paizo to balance classes between each other. While some specialization effects are a bit weaker than others, they still can change the flow of fights substantially. Fighters are good with every weapon under the sun, but they only get critical specialization with weapons that they have master proficiency with, which means that they're only going to have, that effect with a single weapon group until they hit level 13. It makes fighters feel even more like specialists in their given weapons, while not letting them completely overshadow other martials until level 13, where they get every single weapon as a critical specialization. As I mentioned earlier, there's a disparity between how good the different critical specialization effects actually are. As an example, the sword group has a pretty limited power to their critical specialization, which just makes your victim off guard until the start of your next turn. This does make follow-up attacks easier to pull off, but it doesn't really help out a turn from now, does it? By comparison, the polearm effect lets you move your target 5 feet in any direction, which you can use to set up flanks to make your target off guard, or to just force them to use an action to get back adjacent to you again, which is really important because every polearm basically has reach. While it is a little bit sad to use a weapon with a bad critical specialization effect, it's another balancing act that Paizo, follows. If a fighter picks polearms as the weapon group that they're better with, there are only 11 types of polearm in the game that they could actually, use their higher attack modifier and get the critical specialization effect with. If they pick the sword group instead, there are 39 swords in the game. That makes a wider selection of loot that you're finding really, really good, and it's only really coming at the cost of having a worse critical specialization effect. Also, some weapon groups tend to have higher damage dice, and that can lead to them having a bit of a worse critical specialization effect, because they're just better under normal circumstances. Now, the most infamous critical specialization effect in the game absolutely belongs to hammers and flails. Up until the remaster, if you got a critical hit with a hammer or a flail and had their critical specialization effect, your target would get knocked prone without any kind of saving throw. This is one of the reasons why the gnome flick mace was so infamous for a while. Knocking someone prone is a strong effect, and it's even better when it's an add-on to critting someone, which is already really good. With the remaster, this has been adjusted, meaning that now your target gets a reflex save to avoid falling prone, or a fortitude save if you're using a hammer. This is an entirely fair change considering how much stronger the old versions were compared to the other critical specialization effects. Like it was busted. Before this video comes to a close though, I would like to mention that I find it a little weird that spellcasters don't really have any way to get something like a critical specialization effect. I totally think that there's room for items or feats that add a little extra effect to spells whenever you critically hit with them, because, making critical hits cooler is always fun, and different spells will sometimes have different effects if you get a critical hit, but, it'd just be fun to have a universal effect. It doesn't even have to be strong or anything. I just think that it's a bit weird that marshals can get something extra out of hitting someone with a sword really well, while a spellcaster can't get anything beyond double damage for aiming incredibly well. Thanks for watching. I've been really, really busy and really, really exhausted for the past little bit, but I'm still working on coming back. Hopefully I'll be able to put out at least a video a week this month, and I am really sorry about the inconsistency. Regardless, do you have any thoughts about critical hits, or any constructive criticism about the video? Let me know in a comment down below, and while you're down there, you can always subscribe to the channel, or join up as a member. My members help me out a ton, and they really do mean a lot to me. Regardless, until I see you next, live a wonderful life.